So good day, everyone. It's fabulous to be here with you today, and especially on this topic of creating clean energy security overall. First, maybe let us do a quick round of introduction of myself and panelists. Shelly Trench, I'm on the global leadership team for climate and sustainability with the Boston Consulting Group, and I lead climate and sustainability in the Middle East overall. I am very honored to have a very diverse group of companies and backgrounds represented on our panel today. So what I will do is I will ask each one of our panelists to give us a quick introduction, tell us something that is interesting about themselves, what they're bringing to the panel, and then really where they see us moving forward. So maybe I start with yourself, Mr. Miguel Setas from EDP.
Shelly, good morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm Miguel Setas. I'm a member of the board of EDP. So I have sustainability and risk at a global level. EDP is one of the green majors in Europe. We are the third largest power producer in terms of renewables. So we are planning to invest 24 billion euros till 2025 in the renewables deployment. We want to be carbon neutral by 2030 with scope 1 and 2 emissions, and we want to be net zero by 2040. 10 years ahead of what the European Commission is pledging.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's the commitment we need. Next, we have Mr. Luiz Figueira from Electrobas.
So thank you. First of all, I would like to thank you for 3M for this invitation. It is a pleasure to be here to discussing about this very important topic for us, for all the world. My name is Luiz Augusto Figueira. I'm Chief Management and Sustainability Officer of Electrobas. Electrobas is the biggest company, utility company in Brazil. We have a very, very clean matrix, energy matrix. But of course, we have our contribution to this very important discussion about climate change and transition energy. And we would like to discuss today this, how technology, how regulation, how innovation can contribute to us to achieve this important challenge.
Thank you very much. And we have Dr. Afif from the TAQA Group, Transco CEO.
Thanks, Shelly. Good morning. My name is Afif Yafei. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Transco. Before I start, I would like to thank you again for the invitation, and it gives me great pleasure to be here today sharing this panel with the esteemed panelists. So Transco, we're responsible for planning, building, and operating the electrical infrastructure, the high voltage transmission in the UAE and beyond. We're part of the TAQA Group. I believe we are one of the largest companies in the Middle East, one of the 10 top companies in the MENA region, and with a footprint in multiple countries. Thanks.
Very good. And our host, Dr. Gayle Schueller from 3M.
Thank you very much, Shelly. Yes, I'm Gayle Schueller. I serve as 3M's Senior Vice President and Chief Sustainability Officer. It's an honor to bring together this group. And you may wonder, if you think about 3M, you may have thought about Post-it notes or your Scotch-Brite sponges. And I would say that our contributions to the electrical markets and the electrical transmission industry are relatively unknown. So we're really excited to be able to bring together this group, have the partnerships that we do with customers around the world, and to be able to share a little bit more about the latest thinking on the subject during today's panel.
Good. So as we get started, in terms of, let's say, the model that we would like to use for this panel, we would like to be very interactive. So if you have a question, just put your hand up and then we will get to you once the time is right. As we get started, one of the things that we acknowledge is that we're at a very interesting time, and I think also quite positive. Quite often now, as we think about moving $38 trillion in capital towards the energy transition by 2030, we know that we're providing access for over 750 million people that do not have access today. So we are balancing security of supply, reliability of supply, access, and a number of different factors. The good news for us, for all of us in the room today, is that quite often the business case for green technologies is now becoming increasingly positive, and the case for change and the impetus in which we must act is here now. And if I maybe give you just 3 very quick examples before we jump in, on our ability as a people globally to move very quickly. When the Ukraine war started, very quickly Gazprom Germania was put under Yafei, and we were able to put that company in place and secure supply for Europe. We have, if we move from Europe to the Middle East, we have ADNOC that is now investing over 20% of their capital expenditure into green technologies and green energies, expecting them to have a significant proportion of energy to power 75 million homes in the next 10 years. Moving towards China, China Light and Power is completely modernizing and transforming into the company of the future. So I wanted to start this panel on energy, green energy security and scaling on a very positive note, because I do think that we're making a lot of progress. And maybe, Gayle, if I start with you, to balance me a little bit, what do you see as the main challenges that we're dealing with right now as we think about scaling green energy infrastructure? What are the most immediate opportunities and challenges for us?
Well, some of the things that we see, with our partners around the world are really about how the grid changes now that it's bidirectional, or increasingly bidirectional, let's say, so that we have renewables bringing energy to the grid, but not necessarily on a steady basis. We have electrical charging of vehicles that are pulling energy from the grid, but not necessarily on a steady basis. So we need to make sure that we're understanding what's happening at any given moment in time. We have the sensors to understand and really stabilize these pieces. But also at the same time, we recognize that we live in an unstable world from other perspectives. We have sometimes when there's an instability from a country perspective, there may be an intent to cause trouble. There's cybersecurity issues that can cause trouble, and we need to make sure that we're leaning in and we have the intelligence in our grid that takes advantage of all of that advanced digital intelligence, the artificial intelligence, and so on, along with the sensors, to make sure that we're really having the grid stability that we need in the world today. It's beyond a materials problem, it's become a digital problem.
Exactly, and I think, Afif, you can probably tell us a little bit more about that, because in your role with Transco, you are both managing older infrastructure and I think rapidly building out new infrastructure. So can you tell us a little bit about some of the more complex aspects of scaling green energy? The ambitions within the UAE are significant.
Yes, just building upon what you just said is that, yeah, there are themes of challenges that are faced by, grid operators worldwide, and they are unique in its nature, but the majority of the themes go around the reliability. Reliability of the grid. Historically, we've been faced with the requirement to have a very reliable grid that is capable of providing affordable energy to consumers. With the transition that is happening towards renewable and the requirement to maintain the same levels of service, the same level of reliability, resiliency, it's becoming one of the challenges that we're working together with the partners towards finding the best way to integrate this intermittent, in some of the cases, renewable sources into the grid. With that, it's becoming a requirement for very early on stakeholder interactions in order to have the entire value chain of players within the transmission business coming up together to ensure that we seamlessly integrate these renewable sources into the grid.
And Miguel, I know you've thought a lot about grid stability also. Can you tell us a little bit about your perspective on where our priorities are at the moment?
Shelly, I think we have a threefold challenge. First of all, an electric challenge, which is we are phasing out firm sources like coal-fired power plants and other fossil fuel production. At the same time, we are deploying massive amounts of capex to install renewable sources, by either centralized as well as decentralized resources, moving charges like the EV fleets that we are also deploying. So all of this is, for the grids, is a new reality in terms of the kind of stimulus that we have to address. On a second level, I think there is a regulatory challenge as well, because you have to guarantee that you have the correct price signals to address three dimensions of the electric supply, which is energy, you need capacity and flexibility. And you have to establish correct price signals for the intraday, for short-term and long-term. So that's really a challenge from a regulatory standpoint as well. And the other point I would stress is risk, new risks. So you're facing cybersecurity risks, climate change risks, in networks that some of them are aerial, so they are exposed to those impacts. So you're dealing with a much more complex situation. Electric, regulatory, and new risks that should be addressed.
And as we talk about risks and opportunities, Luiz, I know that operational energy efficiency is something that you've been looking at deeply. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you see energy efficiency playing a role in how we think about the future of energy and future of the grid, how you expect that to evolve?
Yes, French. I think that for undeveloped countries, we to contribute to and to construct this energy transition, we cannot do it in one way. We have to do it moving, because we are not more in a phase of mitigation. We have to adapt. Climate change is already installed. So we are not talking to try to think about mitigate. And then I think that energy efficiency is a very important scenario that we can construct this path to the energy transition. And also for the supply chain, because supply chain, it's a very important part of this construction. We cannot think about climate change only, for example, we are talking now about utility companies, but we can think about our suppliers, because our suppliers, when they produce materials like 3M and other big companies, they can contribute and impact this climate change. So I think that energy efficiency in the industry and of course in our business activity can contribute to achieve this goal of climate change adaptation.
So I think you're touching on a very important topic, which is innovation. So as we talk about producing new materials, new ways of working, and maybe I throw that back to you, Gayle, as we talk a little bit about innovation and the role that innovation will play in the transition. And I will go maybe from yourself to Miguel, because it's two very different companies with very different roles in the transition. Maybe you open up and tell us a little bit about how your company is innovating and to contribute to the transition.
Yeah, so at 3M, we think about sustainability with three pillars. It's all about science. We're a very science-based company. So it's science for circular, advancing a global circular economy, science for climate, and science for communities. So that climate piece is really at the core of what we're talking about with disrupting our electrical grid. One of the things that we require is that every new product we launch must have what we call a sustainability value commitment to help advance sustainability. It can be in our own operations using recycled raw materials or improving the efficiency in our operations. But what I think is most relevant in this space is really how we help our customers either improve their energy efficiency, as Luiz was mentioning, or improve the stability of the grid that is all the concern that we've been addressing. So we're keenly focused on not only what the challenges are with this climate challenge, but also where the opportunities are from a business perspective, because we know that both from the material side and from the digital side, we can help our customers find solutions that help stabilize the grid. And I'm so glad you both mentioned the climate effects. We've been working on materials for years in this space, but now it's more about how we advance the electronics, how we advance the digital, how we bring in the sensors to combat the challenges that we face together.
Yeah, and I think you touched on a very interesting point that I don't know if the audience picked up on, as you talked about the sustainable value that each product is bringing to the table. Because personally, I think myself and a lot of what we think as BCG is that we need to evolve from looking at total shareholder return in financial terms only to a more total societal impact. And the role that each of our companies is having on our communities, not only from that dollar perspective. So very, very interesting that 3M is already doing that in a very structured way. And I think a very interesting takeaway for all of us. So thank you.
Thank you, Shelly.
Miguel,
Thank you, Shelly, because that's exactly what we're going after with this. This is the societal impact that comes beyond just the financial. So thank you. Sorry.
Miguel.
I think we have a challenge which is to decarbonize fast. So we need scale and speed, or speed and scale. And for that, we need proven technologies for the time being. We need offshore wind, we need the onshore, we need the solar, all of those technologies that are already commercially viable. But that will take us, let's say, 1 decade away from now. And we'll have also to think what will be the technological developments that we have to put in place to go to the hard-to-abate sectors. And for that, you need green hydrogen, for instance, or to go to floating offshore floating, which is a much harder technology to address. That you'll have that to scale up your offshore investments. So we have a dual track now strategy, which is to accelerate and to deploy massive amounts of capex on the proven technologies, and on a dual track we have also very intense activity on innovation. I've mentioned floating PV, floating offshore, green hydrogen, storage, electric mobility, all of those new technologies that have to be put in place to guarantee that the decarbonization is attained in due time. We are, as I've mentioned in the beginning, pledging that we want to be 10 years ahead of the European milestone of being net zero by 2050. So we want to be net zero by 2040. And we'll have to rely on those new technologies. So I think that's a dual track. On top of that, we know that digitalization is paramount. So we not only invest in innovation, but also in digitalization. For grids and for the whole system, the electrical system, digital will be critical. So we are also pretty much involved on that.
And maybe with that, Afif, I come back to you, because a lot of these, let's say, key priorities I know you're managing right now within Transco. So digitalization of the grid, the rapid scale-up of renewables, and all within a context of a very ambitious net zero goal. I mean, yesterday we saw that the UAE committed to their diversification pathway to get to net zero by 2050. So can you tell us a little bit about the rapid scaling of green energy in the grid and how you prepare for that and what role you are playing?
Let me start, but yes, it's very important. So the nation is playing an important role in setting up the policies and committing to the net zero targets, the announcement that has recently been made, and starting from the energy strategy of 2050. But also as organizations, we are committing to ESG targets. TAQA as a company has committed to ESG targets and interim gas emission targets. And then we as an infrastructure player, we come right there in the middle, connecting these renewable sources to the customers, which the entire value chain is just facilitating this transition. So even at the customer level, Shelly, we've got customers who are asking access to green energy at large, with a value that is associated to it, in order to be part of this journey that we're in. So building up on that, and you know, over the past few years, and it's not just starting now, it's been, you know, the Baraka nuclear power plant. You've mentioned ADNOC. So 30% of ADNOC's you know, electricity consumption is going to be provided from a grid, from green solutions. This is the announcement of the new HVDC kind of connection to the grid, but of the oil platforms. But on top of that, also we've got, you know, the major single large sites of PV that has been deployed over the past few years. As we speak, we are commissioning the Dhafra PV, which is one of the largest in the world. It's 2 gigawatts of power that's going to be provided to the grid. So, you know, overall, it's a transition, and we're at it right there in the middle, facilitating this transition towards you know, the green energy mix.
And it's interesting that you talk about Rafa and the scaling of PV, and I think, Luiz, it would be a part of your forte, I think, is operational efficiency and how we bring efficiencies into business practices overall. So the role that ops, financial efficiency, what role do you see that playing in our ability to rapidly deploy these green technologies?
I would like to come back to some points that Miguel said about technology, and of course my friend here about digitalization, to comment about this. Because a very important issue when we think about renewable energy is how to connect them to the grid installed. And then we have a lot of challenges. Recently, 3 years ago, we have a very important experience in Brazil because we have big reservoirs, and we would like to, we installed some panels, solar panels in the middle of the reservoir to capture the solar energy. But before that, we began a strong research with academy, with suppliers that made the partnership with us to produce materials and a special kind of solar panel that doesn't impact the biodiversity that in the place. So it's important to, when we are talking about renewable energy, energy efficiency, to think about this new world that we have now. This new world is committed with all these different stakeholders. We are talking about suppliers, we are talking about communities, and how don't impact their lives. That's our point. We have to think, it's a huge challenge because it's different, and we think now, we think 10 or 20 years ago that we decide to construct a power plant or a transmission line. We don't have this in mind, that a movement can impact all this life. And now we have to join everything. We cannot only see a part of that we're trying to develop. So that's our big challenge now, to construct everything together. And again, what I said, we don't have time to think about this. We don't have time to plan. We have to move and act. That's our big challenge.
I'm going to open up to the audience now, but before I do that, I'll do something that I said I would do at the end. And I'm going to ask each of you now for one big idea that you would like to share with the audience. And then I open it up to the audience, maybe to get your ideas or your questions for the panel.
I think we have a chance, it's one in a lifetime chance of changing the course of history. We are here together in this co-op to guarantee that we really make it happen, that the action is the key word of our all of these negotiations. So what I think it's important is everyone has to do its part. And this requires a multi-stakeholder approach, all hands on deck. Everyone is needed to guarantee that there is total alignment with the final objective, which is to guarantee that we progress to a low-carbon economy, we progress to a more equitable society, and that we can preserve the environment that was given by our ancestors. We have to do that for our kids.
So the big idea is multi-stakeholder management.
I was thinking about that because the problem that we have today was created by this kind of society that we are living now. And to solve this problem, we have to be open-minded. So I think one of the solutions is innovation, to be open to the new innovations and to create the new way to explore the Earth. That's our point that I would like to think about this.
New ways of exploring.
Yeah, the way to explore this. And to think about the new generations, of course.
Afif?
Well, we touched a lot about the challenges that we're facing, but we really need to look at them as opportunities. And in reality, I'll just, I'll capture some of the things that Miguel mentioned. We're on the verge of a turning point. Just zooming in a little bit into, let's say a utility business in the transmission side, I think we've integrated the first, nuclear electrons in our grid. Then we also integrated the first PV electrons into the grid. I believe, as these challenges and opportunities as we progress for larger integration and larger penetration of renewables into, the energy mix, this is just presenting or giving ourselves an opportunity to have the proper studying, planning, and learning, and work with a larger stakeholder engagement to really understand and cascade that learnings to the larger communities.
Always a challenge to go after three distinguished speakers, so I'd agree with the points that you're making. It's a critical time in our energy and power consumption and delivery. And for my big idea, I think of three words, really. It's about science and technology driving the way, with collaboration between key leaders, and urgency. So science, collaboration, and urgency. Together.
I like that very much. So I open it up. Do we have any questions coming in from the audience or any comments, please?
I was speaking with somebody because I'm from 3M, working with Gayle closely. But I'm covered. It's not a planned question at all, and it's more for the three gentlemen, so to save Gayle. But I'm in charge of public policy relationship with governments. So I will be very interested from your angle, for three of you, what do you ask to your governments? What do you ask to the legislator to be able to achieve your objectives? Thank you.
What's your name, sorry? Maxim? First of all, I think we need predictability and to reduce volatility of our regulatory frameworks and of our public policy packages. So I think that's the overarching principle. It's to give visibility, it's to give predictability, it's to give stability. On a second level, we are obviously in a moment of scaling up investment, so we need. I think we need to be agile. We need to be effective. So everything that has to do with permitting, with license, has to be taken care of to guarantee the exponential growth that we are trying to deploy, to address, is attainable. Obviously, regulatory frameworks for decentralized resources, for everything to deal with storage, new technologies, is also very critical and paramount. New developments like green hydrogen, also very critical. So we have to have regulatory measures, initiatives that give the correct price signal. I'm going to switch with Luiz. So green hydrogen is definitely one of the main drivers of decarbonization going forward for the hard-to-abate sectors, for long-haul transportation, for aviation, for cement, for steel production. All of those sectors, industrial sectors, very complex, where electrification is not viable. We need to have green hydrogen to decarbonize those sectors. So green hydrogen, new technologies, as I've mentioned, storage, decentralized resources. The other point, very critical, it's to internalize externalities. So the correct price signals for carbon are critical on an economy-wide perspective for countries and for industries. So that's really also paramount for the industry. So I would sum up saying that we need visibility, less volatility, predictability to envisage the long term, and the correct signals to guarantee that we are totally aligned in terms of investment needs in the sector.
Very clear.
Thank you, Shelly. Robert Spencer from AECOM. Gayle, I think it was you that touched on this with your 3 C's, and one of them was community. But it's a question to anyone on the panel who wants to answer. I think there is a huge amount that individuals can do, and obviously we need to be mindful of that in terms of an individual household's capabilities and wealth. But to what extent are you and your companies reaching out to provide education, insights, and stakeholder support to your customers in order to help them understand the energy transition and indeed act on it where they can?
And maybe if I broaden, Robert's question to say, how are we activating the community towards the transition? Because quite often we're seeing a lot of focus on governments and companies. So let's talk a little bit about community activation. Anyone wants to take that?
No, I can, I don't know, perhaps go.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I think, one of the things, the awareness of the customers by themselves from the beginning, I mentioned a little bit that they're requiring access, but these were on the industrial side of the business where it makes sense. But we've also seen, the normal customers that are asking for access to clean, green energy. On top of that, I think, as we speak, a colleague of mine is basically speaking on another panel on energy efficiency, demand side management. These are all part of the ESG strategy that the companies are currently working towards. So it plays an important role, and it's an obligation on organizations in order to make sure that we reach out to the local communities. We're having those continuous dialogue with them, and it's not just a strategy, but it actually touches the lives of the people, and it reciprocates between their requirements and what we can provide as organizations to them.
Miguel, do you want to?
I think that the question is centerpiece to the challenge that we are facing today. We have various experiences across the globe, from dealing with indigenous populations in the Amazon region to build hydropower plants. That's kind of challenge that we have. It's very difficult to face that challenge. We have old installations of coal-fired power production that we are trying to revamp and to install green hydrogen hubs. And we have unemployment to deal with, requalification, new jobs, all of that to take care of. So I think dealing with the social part of the sector of energy deployment is really, I would say, the first letter of ESG, to be quite honest. I think it's much more important to deal with the S than with the technology. When you think of Brazil, perhaps people don't know, but there are 33 million people with hunger. There are 125 million people with food uncertainty. So they have lunch, they don't know if they have dinner, they don't know if they will have lunch. So unless you solve these social issues, you cannot help these countries and help these communities to deploy this kind of investment. So I think the S part of the equation is critical, it's fundamental, and there should be policies, specific policies to address that before the technology challenge, which for the time being is already dominated. So I think you touched the Achilles heel of our current challenges.
And I think more and more what we're seeing as we build out strategies for governments is that when they develop their decarbonization or their sustainability strategies, the socio-economic element is becoming a first leg of how we plan for that. So I see that becoming more relevant. And I think the other side to your question, which we haven't touched on, is the fact that customers are actually willing to pay. And we have run studies that show that customers are willing to pay upward of a 10% premium. And this is not only the individual customer, but it's also corporates when we look at incorporating green steel, low carbon cement into developments, when we look at the added cost of recycling. So I think the willingness to pay is there. We just need to think through how we more actively engage communities, both the corporates and the individuals.
Hi there. Thank you all for this discussion. I wanted to ask, because you were talking both about proven technologies, but also about innovation. So I wanted to specifically ask about nuclear power. So for the UAE, for example, the Baraka nuclear power plant, when it turned on, became the single largest source of clean energy for the UAE, but also in the Arab world. And then is 3M Minnesota, correct?
That's where our headquarters are located.
Yeah, and nuclear is the single largest source of carbon-free power in the state as well. So in combination with having that proven historical track record, but also a lot of exciting new innovations around advanced nuclear reactors, small nuclear reactors, I'm wondering if any of your companies or organizations have looked into nuclear power and what role that might have in creating clean energy security.
And maybe we take the question more broadly. So what do you see as the role of nuclear in securing clean energy supply? And then what are your companies doing with that context?
Maybe I'll start, since we have integrated the third nuclear,
Yes.
or as we speak, it was the first time the third unit of Baraka power plant has been synchronized to the UAE's grid a quarter ago. So yes, we do see there is, let me take a step back. For a nation like the UAE to start to embark on a nuclear journey 10 years ago, it was a milestone what we achieved in the past couple of years of having, the base load basically is coming from the nuclear power plants. And it provides a reliable source that is taking care of let's say, the base consumption in the country, and also giving the resilience to the grid, since we're integrated, as you speak, to the neighboring countries in the Arab world. I believe it's a step towards, we hear about the plans that we're having in the region, in the Middle East, on having nuclear power, a part of the mix. But we've got a fourth unit that is coming online, and with that, we're going to be reaching 25% of our peak is being supplied. So I definitely see it as becoming as part of the future of the mix, but coupled with the PV plants that are being commissioned, and also a little bit on the wind energies that is being explored. But the second part of the question is the new technologies. I believe they also play an important role, given that we've seen, the smaller size of the isolated nuclear plants that could be part of the future. There is a lot of research and development that is ongoing on that front, and I think as organizations, countries, we have a role to play to invest, scale up, and then just deploy in our fleets when available.
We in Brazil, we have two big power nuclear plants. We are constructing the third one, and I think that nuclear is a solution also. We cannot discard it. Like we heard here, new technologies and green hydrogen and all the other technologies we are here on this COP27. Nuclear is it's not a new technology, it's an old technology, but we cannot discard it. We cannot discard. We can think about how to mitigate the impacts, because we have impacts, of course, and how we can put it on the grid and compose this whole solution. So in Brazil, we are constructing the third, and of course, maybe we can construct another, because to turn off the coal plants and the other, we have to produce energy from our other source. And I would, if I can have some time, I would complete the answer of Maxime and the colleague there. When he asked about the role of the governance, I think it's very important. And Miguel, I think that Miguel said everything, but I would add one word. We need partnership between government and companies and, of course, all the stakeholders. And when we are talking about stakeholders, I go to the other question that answered about clients, customers, communities. And the government has an important role to engage these people also, to send the message of the urgency climate for them. So the partnership with government is very important at that moment, because to have to give a knowledge, awareness for all these people. Because it's not only us, the companies, that should be aware. Everyone should be aware.
Okay, go ahead.
As possibly the only nuclear physicist trained on the panel, I would just answer that nuclear, like any energy source, is tricky business. I mean, we look no further than Fukushima or some things that have been happening in the Ukraine to recognize that there's concerns. You are absolutely correct that in Minnesota it's a very stable source. I think it has a really important place on the grid. And I also think that the advances in the technology that are happening right now are incredibly exciting in terms of offering that stability while reducing some of the risk of some of the traditional nuclear approaches with waste and so on. I talked about our Science for Circular pillar. That's where I get nervous about nuclear. You know, it's less about the climate pillar, but the circular one. And I'm really excited about some of the new technologies that are coming forward. We have a number of groups. We have a concept of 15% time in our company where people can work on anything they want. And we have a group that is working on nuclear power and how to advance that in new and creative ways. So I'm excited to see where that's going to go and how it can impact the world more positively.
So I do think that we all have a unique gift and opportunity being here at COP. And in some ways, there is also an accountability, and that accountability is to elevate ourselves from the single stakeholder approach to that multi-stakeholder approach. So how can we drive better coordination and collaboration? So my question for you on the panel is, as we think about policies, and quite often we're thinking about policies, we're answering these questions from the view of a single government. How do you think we can move forward, or what is needed as we move forward for us to focus on across governments and in the COP negotiations that are happening, you know, in this forum in these weeks? What is a big win that you think we can get coming out of this COP, and even as we look ahead to COP 28?
Looking to me, Shelly.
Yeah.
No, I think we are all on the same page. We know that COP26 was a COP of commitments. We want this COP to be COP of action. We know that COP26 was COP of the global north. We want this COP to be rebalanced to global south. We know that COP26 was a decisive moment, well, to project the future, and the future is happening now. So we have to guarantee that we are really focused on making it happen. So I think that, and if we have all these mindsets, if all the governments, all the stakeholders present here, if we adopt this mindset that we have a solution to deliver to the world, I think we should get it.
Good. And I will prompt our panelists to progress the answer. So if we say that these are the COPs of implementation and action, then where are the priorities? Are the priorities around technology, you know, funding for technology progress? Where do you think we need to see our governments and the stakeholders that are making decisions in these COP delegations focusing their time and their discussions?
I think that you said, I think funding, it's a key word for continue, for going forward. Because if you see here, we have a lot of different solutions for everything. But if the financial sector didn't recognize that this is an important issue, and they offer for the companies that really can offer this solution good financing, we cannot work. So financial is important recognition, and of course, these companies that want to move on can do their job with financial and with money.
Very good. So, Afif and Gayle, as we focus on implementation and we direct funding to the right channels, where do you think we need to prioritize that funding, especially from a technology perspective?
Well, I was just going to say that I think it's really important that that collaboration piece is the piece that hasn't been yet discussed in answering this question. It's, yes, the latest science, but understanding in enough detail to be making the decisions by limiting the unintended consequences. This is literally a powerful space. And what we find is that if governments work on their own without sufficient input from a variety of corporate sources, they can miss, and they can have some unintended consequences. So that's where I think the collaboration is so important, that the governments be fully informed with corporate perspectives and the community perspectives so that we can help get to the best answers.
No, I'll just...
If you are implementing, you're building the grid, so tell us.
Exactly. So you know, as we've been speaking, yes, the government backing has paved the way in earlier you know, the step changes that we've seen in the industry. And I think that's still important for us to take it to the next level. But on top of that, it's, you know, we spoke a little bit about the policies and the regulators' duties. Yes, it's a thin balance, or a very fine balance that they need to, they need to find between having the customers' requirements are also progressing with this agenda, progressing with this change. So I think being dynamic at this stage, focusing on where it's required, whether it's on the research and development side of the business or investing in the infrastructure as we see happening today. I think both of them are important. All areas are a must. We are going to experiment, but definitely there is only one way to take it forward.
Very good. So I throw it back to the audience. Thank you.
I'm from Suriname. I'm also with the Alliance of Small Island States. I have a question for the panel with regards to what we see in small islands is a lot of technology dumping. Like when there's like new innovations and newer technology that are more efficient, we see that the older technology is being dumped in developing states that can now only afford the old technology that has come on the market. What has your organization, or what is your opinion with regards to technology dumping?
So maybe I just repeat the question for everyone. Also, being a small islander from Trinidad and Tobago, the question is, quite often we see technology dumping. Older technology is going to the smaller countries that cannot afford, let's say, the green or the newer technologies. And the question is, what are you doing? And maybe I brought into, what is the role of corporates and companies to bring solutions to the less developed countries and the smaller island states?
In our case, we have an initiative called Access to Energy that is devised to help out sub-Saharan countries, and we have invested over time, and now we are this week we are announcing 1 million euros of investment for 4 countries in nine projects, I guess, basically to help out communities and populations to use energy systems, but they have to be localized, they have to be adapted. So I wouldn't call it technology dumping. We are using adapted technologies with solar production, used, for instance, for cooling in markets, for selling fish in markets with PV panels. But so those technologies are adapted to the local reality. They have to be economically viable. They have to be, in a certain way, from its unitary costs, they have to be competitive. So those solutions are local solutions. They're not solutions that we would use in Europe, but because of the local challenges. And that's, we've been doing that with success. and we've changed the life of many people, giving them new solutions. So that's part also of innovation. So using innovative solutions that are catering to the needs of those populations, but they have tweaks that make them compatible with the local reality.
So I guess the point is about bringing funding to the countries that need it most. And maybe a follow-up for you is, do you do this as a part of your social responsibility program? And do you see it, or do you see it as part of your, let's say, core, revenue generating?
That's a very good question, Shelly. Well, and we've been debating that over time. It's an internal.
Most of my clients have been.
I know.
Not to single you out, but because I know it's a challenge.
From time to time, we tend to give those projects a business spin, but it never stands out as a business. So for us today, it's much more a corporate sustainability strategy than a business. We've tried to make those investments as businesses, but they didn't prove themselves.
Because, maybe to answer your question and to put my spin on it, I think as corporates do their role, one of the things that we need to do as these small islands is our governments need to think through how we put the policies and incentives in place to bring the funding in to make these businesses more viable. Any other responses, or should I move on? Any other questions from the audience?
Thank you. Hi, Al-Karim Govinji from DNV. One of the things we've seen is, of course, the Inflation Reduction Act in the US, which tries and provide massive opportunities in terms of tax credits for a range of people in the clean energy supply chain, whether it's manufacturers of components, hydrogen, renewables, etc. Whilst that's obviously going to give a big boost to the US market, it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on that, but also, do you see the need then from others in other regions to also upscale their level of support, policy support, to these technologies to ensure that perhaps investment does not focus on the US but comes to these other markets as well?
As you all are thinking about who wants to step in next, I would say yes. The IRA has been really exciting in terms of the opportunities that it can advance in the United States. And every company I talk with is finding where their angle is to contribute. And it's really helping build the momentum, excitement, and energy. So I'm excited about where that's going to go.
I can comment on that as well. No doubt that the US has the most friendly environment for investment, as I would say the most simple and straightforward mechanisms to incentivize investments. Europe is also doing a great job with the 55 package, the REPowerEU packages. It's more difficult when we drill down those policies to a national and local level, which in the US are much more simplified, and the incentives are much more clearer. So I think the US and Europe are doing a great job on creating the right frameworks to incentivize investments. When you go to other regions of the globe, that's not the same reality that we are finding out. Example in Brazil, which is one of the countries where we envisage with one of the largest potentials for green hydrogen in the future. We are waiting for regulatory signals for H2 development. So we are developing one project in Brazil. Right now it will be our first hydrogen molecule in the world in one of Brazilian ports. But it's a research and development project. It's not yet funded with a clear regulatory framework and supportive policy to deploy these kind of investments.
I would like only to add that as we talked here, Mr. Schueller said, it's very important this commitment with regulators, government, and technology. These three very important stakeholders together, they can, if we work together, we can try to incentivize more investment in technology and, of course, new solutions.
Very good. Any final question?
Hi, thank you so much for being here. So we heard in some of the informal discussions yesterday about the role of the private sector in funding some of the loss and damages. I'm just wondering if you guys have any thoughts about the role of business in that.
Very good question. What is the role of the private sector in funding loss and damage? There's been a lot of discussions in this COP. We see a lot of governments making commitments and forming deals, which will be very helpful. What is the role of the individual company?
Okay, so if I understand it correctly, I think we play the major role in actually translating those, those ambitious targets into reality. I think it's a heavy responsibility on us, for example, to integrate all of these renewable targets or all of this renewable energy into the grid, having the infrastructure ready to incorporate all of all of these new sources of energy into the grid and turning it into energy that is being used by the customers. So I think us as companies, we are right at the heart of it. The cornerstone of facilitating that transition is basically building up the infrastructure to facilitate that. So an important role, to be honest.
And maybe if I give a response before we go on to the other panelists, I think companies are the mechanism for implementation. So the role of the company is to ensure that the technology transfer, the capability build-up, it moves from the developed to the, let's say, the less developed companies or the companies that are in need of damage. I think they will be the fastest conduit that we have to be able to implement the plans and the deals that we're seeing.
And I guess I would just build on that is the corporate innovation models and bringing the new technologies in to the previous question as well about the island nations and technology dumping. If we can bring forward the new technologies and leapfrog some of the previous ones, bring in things that are more resilient for the grid going forward, bring in things that are stronger for the future, and bring forward, like, I just think about even across Africa where everyone has a cell phone, but people may not have the infrastructure of wires going to their home like they had in Europe or North America. I think that's part of the opportunity with the corporates, is to give that new technology, bring in the new ways of going so that it is more resilient for the future. And people are more inspired by it as well.
Very good. As we bring this to a close, maybe I will run through our esteemed panelists. And we focused a lot today, and we wanted to talk about how we create clean energy security. To ensure the security, underlining security in the clean energy, what's the one big idea that you would like our audience to walk away with and potentially champion for the rest of the days that we have left at COP? Gayle, you want to start?
I'll just go back to the ones I said before. I really think it's all about science, collaboration, and urgency.
I'll use the multi-stakeholder engagement early in the process.
I should say security, as you said, affordable energy, and cooperation.
I like the words that were said by Gayle, by Afif, and Luiz. I think it's a question of now of ambition and making it happen.
Very good. So thank you very much for your engagement today, and I hope you have a productive session with the rest of you. Thank you to our panelists.